Hello, everyone, and welcome. A few months ago, BTQ Financial partnered with Cascade Insights to conduct a survey of executive leaders across the nonprofit sector. Our goal was to better understand the challenges organizations are facing within the finance function. Today, we're excited to share some of the key insights from that survey, and we'll also highlight how BTQ is working alongside our nonprofit clients to address and reduce those challenges through our model and approach. So before we dive into today's content, we'd like to take a moment to briefly introduce ourselves. My name is Andrew Paramal, and I'm a partner at BTQ Financial, and I focus on continuously improving our client operations and enhancing our service products. More directly, these are the internal processes and systems that support our client services team. That team is made of folks who work directly with our nonprofit partners in CFO level and deputy CFO level roles. I'm joined today by one of those team members, Cecil John, who plays a key role in delivering day-to-day strategic financial support to some of our clients. Cecil, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Cecil John. I'm a senior VP of finance here at BTQ. I've been a nonprofit consultant for over a decade now. I'm really focused on this, pretty much doing CFO work for organizations. Prior to that, I was in industry and I worked in nonprofits for several years as well.
So that's a little bit about us. Before we go further, we'll also take a moment to introduce BTQ, and this is for those who may not be as familiar with who we are and what we do. BTQ has been providing finance as a service, what many commonly call outsourced financial management, for nearly 30 years. It actually started as a broader consulting firm, but early on, our founders recognized a real need for finance, accounting, and grants and contracts management support within the nonprofit sector. And that's what led to the creation of BTQ Financial. Since then, we've grown largely through word-of-mouth referrals to support more than 70 clients across the United States, often in key nonprofit hubs. Our team includes over 200 professionals who deliver services ranging from full finance as a service solutions to more flexible support models that work within a client's existing systems. We also offer standalone medical billing and grants and contracts management support. We operate in more of a partnership model with our clients, which you can see by the fact that 86% of our clients have been with us for 5 years or more, and over a quarter of our clients have been with us for more than a decade. On the right side of the slide here, you'll see a sample of the types of organizations we serve. That includes health home organizations, professional associations, membership organizations, and social and human service providers, just to name a few. So moving on to our content for the session, here's a quick roadmap for today, just to give you a sense of where we're headed. We'll start by outlining the scope of the survey, who we reached out to, and what we set out to learn. From there, we'll take a look at the current state of the nonprofit sector at a fairly high level, followed by an exploration of the top financial management hurdles organizations are facing, and we'll share some direct insights that came out of the survey. Then we'll examine some key challenges, particularly around hiring and staffing. And we'll also walk through how BTQ's finance as a service model helps address these issues and ultimately empowers nonprofits to make a greater impact. And of course, we'll leave some time at the end, as Allison mentioned, for any questions that come up throughout the presentation. So let's jump into the survey participants. We'll take a quick look at who we surveyed. We spoke with nonprofit leaders across the sector, ranging from executive directors and CEOs to COOs and founders. So we were really hearing directly from decision makers. These organizations are based in major metro areas across the United States, and they represent a broad mix of subsectors, including human and health services, animal welfare, and other charitable social service missions. In terms of size, these nonprofits had annual budgets ranging from $3 million all the way up to $200 million. So the findings speak to a wide variety of operational realities and challenges across the sector. Well, before we get into the survey results, we thought it'd be helpful to take a step back and look at the broader sector landscape. Cecil is going to walk us through some of these reflections. Cecil?
Sure, thank you. So in today's climates, nine nonprofits are facing a perfect storm, right? We have a higher demand in services, however, your budgets are tighter. We're talking about organizations that serve as the backbone to our communities. 83% of Americans consider the services delivered by nonprofits provide essential services. These services are social services, education, healthcare, housing. The list can go on, right? But these aren't nice to have programs. These are need to have programs. But the hard truth is that between 60% to 80% of nonprofits could find themselves at serious financial risk if there's a disruption in federal grants. Many of you that are listening today, I'm sure that hits close to home. I'm sure you felt it. I'm sure you're feeling it right now. When we had the recent federal funding freeze, I know it was just a day or two, but many of our clients who rely heavily on that funding, we had to spring into action. We immediately started thinking of contingency plans. We asked the tough questions. And these are the questions, you always have to ask yourself and your organization is what happens to staffing? How do we keep the programs running? And the biggest one is how long can our organization sustain without these federal dollars? And it's not just about the dollars, right? There's a bigger conversation happening. As you can see on the slide, 70% of nonprofit leaders are worried that the current political climate will negatively impact their organization. And who can blame them, right? We see it and we feel it. We have constant policy shifts, we have funding uncertainties, there's ever-changing regulations. Nonprofits are under immense pressure because one, you want to stay compliant, but you also want to provide the services the best you can to your community and your clients. So these changes really just impact everything and how you serve your communities at every level. There are other top financial challenges as well, which Andrew will go through on the next slide.
Thanks, Sissel, and it's really important points to make about sort of the headwinds that are coming and the need for resilient financial infrastructure. But given that broader landscape, what are some of the specific challenges nonprofit leaders are facing right now with respect to financial management? And our survey found that 6 key challenge themes rose to the top. I'll walk through them, a little briefly here. First, many leaders are actively trying to assess their financial sustainability and manage risk, but often without the tools or bandwidth to do it in a proactive way. So what that means is it's done reactively, and oftentimes can be too late to properly navigate that risk that comes into the organization. The second challenge was ensuring accurate and timely financial reporting. And this continues to be a pressure point, especially for organizations juggling multiple revenue sources and reporting requirements and compliance, as Sissel mentioned. Third, audit preparation and regulatory compliance are ongoing concerns. It's not just about getting through the audit, it's about being ready for it year-round without disrupting your operations and requiring additional resources and effort during audit season. Fourth, as nonprofits evolve, many find it hard to scale their finance function accordingly. Systems and processes that worked at one stage can start to break down, or they don't keep pace with rapid organizational change. Fifth, leaders cited the need for well-defined, consistent financial processes, particularly as staff turnover or remote work models increase. And finally, lower insufficient operating reserves remain a top concern. Many organizations are running incredibly lean without a buffer for unexpected events, and some are even operating with little or no margin for error. And these 6 areas are not only common, they're deeply interconnected, and they show up across mission types, budget sizes, and geographies. Sissel, I know you're deeply entrenched with your clients every day. Any thoughts on how some of these challenges show up in practice, and maybe speak to a few that you see most often?
Sure. So I've seen, honestly, all of these challenges firsthand with many of the organizations that I have worked with. So there's some key areas that I want to walk through that I've seen nonprofits often struggle with. One is the financial sustainability and risk. Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Especially about federal funding. But this is not the only case. We saw this during when COVID hit, when funding suddenly slowed down, it stopped, staff had to be furloughed. That's why it's really important to have a risk assessment, to conduct a risk assessment is very critical. Organizations need to ask, again, how sustainable are we if this funding dries up, right? What are our backup plans? All of this will give clarity in advance to help prevent any panic or chaos that comes with changes. Another one that Andrew had hit was audit preparation. Audit prep should not begin when the audit just starts, right? It is something that is done well before the fiscal year. We've had many organizations come and their audit is delayed, which leads to, their single audit being delayed. And with that delay becomes, you become a high risk organization, your funding can decrease. So, what we do here at BTQ is, we're reviewing schedules, confirming all required documents in the previous fiscal year. Within our 9-month review, we're doing that, just ensuring that your records are clean and accurate, because the main goal is that we want to be proactive and we want our audits to go smooth and meet the deadlines. One main thing is also consistent financial processes. Having clear and consistent process is really your foundation. It really allows everything else, your reporting, compliance, planning to run smoothly. It's really your financial roadmap. If those are well-defined and consistent, you can move on from shifting from a day-to-day mindset to that strategic long-term thinking, right? I know a lot of nonprofits have a hard time creating an operating reserve. And really that's because nonprofits operate lean, right? The reserves are hard to build because much of the funding goes right back into operations. But if you have, clear and consistent processes, and I know funding is different for everyone, but if you can forecast and do a risk assessment of these situations, you can, get to the point where you are having some operating reserves, right? Best practice is that you have 3 months worth of operating reserves. Now that's shifted, post-COVID, it's really shifted from 3 months to more like 6 months. So it is really important that, you have a good defined process and then move towards thinking of a long-term planning for your organization. I did want to talk about on the next slide, some of the other main pain points of a nonprofit and how it is when you're with a partner, a finance and accounting partner, and when you're not. So 2 of the main things. One is ensuring accurate and timely financial reporting. One of the biggest pain points we see in nonprofit finance is timely and accurate reporting. It's often underestimated. In fact, as you can see, studies show 35% of organizations are more likely to struggle in this area without a financial partner. I have worked at nonprofits, so I know it can be difficult to close the books that month, challenges with timing, the bandwidth. There's so many issues, so I see a lot of organizations now closing quarterly, doing a soft close, just doing a year-end close. But the reality is, without a regular monthly close, it's really difficult to, 1, track your variances, spot trends, and make strategic decisions more in real time, right? So with our clients, we make a monthly close. That's one of our top priorities, because what we really want to provide, I think what a lot of partners provide, is that they want to give leadership timely, accurate insight, right? So they can make the decisions they need to make. Another pain point is to scale finance to support growth. Scaling finance is a major challenge, especially for growing organizations. Like as you see, 38% say they struggle to scale their finance functions to support growth. So I have a quick example of what I mean by that. So we have an organization that went from 32 million to about 64 million within the year over year. So that kind of growth is exciting, right? It's an amazing growth for an organization, but it does come with a huge administrative lift. You're thinking about now budgeting, the resource planning, reporting. It can get very complicated. Without a partner to manage that growth, leadership can get overwhelmed, which can slow the progress. It can cause inefficiencies, and it also can take away from your time of maybe looking for other funding, right? Some missed opportunities can happen. We also have it on the other side. There's support growth, but then there's also the flip side where if there's a loss of funding, a significant loss of funding, that's a totally different kind of challenge. In those moments, right, having financial consultant here, as you can see, a partner would be helpful just because you need to scale down responsibly. You need to protect your core operations and develop contingency plans to stay stable.
And those are things that we never really want to think about, but they happen. And as we're seeing now more than ever, we have to be mindful of those kinds of things happening, and being able to kind of scale up or down and evolve your functions is a really important item. And what this really shows is that organizations who partnered with a provider really feel more confident and capable and better equipped to navigate that complexity and that change as compared to organizations who haven't. So on the next slide, it highlights one of the most consistent themes that we heard from nonprofit leaders from our survey was staffing, specifically turnover in the finance function. And as you can see here, only 28% of respondents said turnover was rare. The majority, 72%, reported that it happens occasionally, frequently, or even very frequently. And we all know the ripple effects this can create. Delays in reporting, inconsistent processes, as we've mentioned, institutional knowledge loss, which is often overlooked in organizations, and added pressure on executive leadership to backfill or retrain. We can't tell you how many times leaders come to us with stories of being way into the weeds with their finance function and not being able to strategically focus on its mission. And it's not just a hiring challenge, right? It's a continuity and capacity challenge, and it directly impacts an organization's ability to plan, to stay compliant, and respond to your funders with confidence. But as we move forward, when we hear about staffing challenges, it's easy to assume it's just a hiring or retention issue, but the information from our survey tells us a deeper story. What we're actually seeing is a more systemic breakdown. For example, an average of 19 days to close the books isn't just a staffing lag. It's a sign that your processes and systems may not be fully optimized or resilient in the face of change. And there's a substantial portion of the organizations that we surveyed that have a close of more than 21 days and a few over 30 days. Similarly, the fact that 74% of leaders experience cash flow problems and over half have to reforecast budgets frequently points to a deeper need for stronger financial planning and more frameworks, and not just more hands on deck. You can throw resources at the problem, but it doesn't necessarily solve the underlying issues. So while staffing plays a role, these challenges reflect something more foundational. Nonprofits and organizations need more scalable, strategic, and systems-based finance operations to keep pace with their mission and the evolving nature of the industry. Cecil, you want to walk us through some of the voices of leadership that we took away from the survey?
Sure. So, I'm not going to go through each one, but these are several nonprofits and how they address the current challenges. We have regular internal audits, we engage in external audits, we have third-party financial partners, and they also are hiring specialist financial talent to conduct training for current employees. I think this is really to show how many nonprofits are really moving towards hiring outside consultants, right, to assist them in their fiscal processes to be more transparent and be more in line with best practices.
And so it's pretty clear that more and more organizations are thinking about finance transformation and how to do it smarter with the right structure and, most importantly, with the right support in place. So moving on to the next slide, when we asked nonprofit leaders what kind of support would help them focus more on mission and impact, these were the top needs. Strategic FP&A, grant reporting, and access to fractional CFO support all rose to the top. But that's not it. Core functions like budgeting, audit prep, and revenue recognition were also important ones. And that seems like quite a bit of the functions within finance overall. And these aren't just operational areas, right? Not just operational tasks. They're strategic enablers, these functions. And when they're handled well, they free up leadership to make decisions, to think big, and really lead with confidence. So you're able to move towards the mission part of your business more fully with someone handling or taking care of sort of the finance component. And one of the things that was especially striking to us, 100% of the leaders in our survey already outsource at least one, usually internal function. And that could be IT, legal services, or marketing services. But only 30% outsource their finance function, even though what we saw throughout the survey is that there's clearly a need there for more financial support. That's a huge opportunity because working with a strategic finance partner, if it's done right, it delivers the structure, visibility, and capacity nonprofits need to scale impact without burning out their teams. And it's almost more important than some of these other functions like IT, legal services, or marketing. Sissel, I think you're going to take us through the next slide on why nonprofits use these kinds of partnerships, right?
Mhm. So the top 5 reasons nonprofits utilize an accounting finance partner. One, the main one, is really more time for leadership to focus on mission-driven activities, right? We understand as a partner the staffing shortages, timing, availability. Managing finance is time-consuming. It can be tough. And the main thing is that our mission is really to handle the back end so your team can stay focused on your mission. The second one is time savings and streamlined financial and accounting processes. We see it all the time. When you don't have a dedicated finance team or you have a staffing shortage in your finance team, leadership often gets pulled into the admin work, right? Executive directors and program leads spending more time on accounting than they are on strategic planning. It's really not sustainable. It's not sustainable for growth. Then we have third is more timely and accurate financial reporting. And it's really not just about the numbers, right? It's about you're having solid policies and a reliable team in place to ensure that things are running accurately, the deliverables are on time. Fourth is access to specialized nonprofit financial expertise. This is, I think, the biggest perk, the biggest reason it should be, because whether you work with when you work with a financial partner, you are not just hiring one person. You are getting a full team of specialists, right? Whether you have new funding, whether you've never submitted an indirect cost and you need help on the submission. This is your first time going through a single audit, right? There's an expert in all these areas. And the main point is to just give you more peace of mind of your financials and know that it's in good hands and it's in hands of experts that have been doing it for many, many years. Fifth is a cost savings from staff and financial systems. So organizations often overlook the full cost of their finance function. It's not just, your payroll, including, fringe, but it's also your systems, if your implementation, other areas, training, and it often is much higher than what you really think it is. Often a financial partner can come in even lower. Also, you're not paying for financial systems, which is usually included. This means no extra cost and it's no impact to your staff. With the right support, your leadership can focus on driving the mission forward, which is the main goal.
And so with these 5 components in mind, you might be wondering, what does it actually look like in practice when you work with a partner? So this slide gives us a quick snapshot of how BTQ supports nonprofits across the board through our core service areas. First, we provide finance as a service. That's everything from day-to-day transaction management and financial reporting to strategic analysis and decision support. For organizations that deliver healthcare services, we also offer revenue cycle management, including claims processing, receivables tracking, and HIPAA compliant reporting. And finally, We specialize in grants and contracts management, helping clients stay compliant, automate funder reporting, and monitor their budgets in real time. All of these services are designed with really one goal in mind, and it's to give nonprofits the financial clarity, the structure, and the support they need to focus more on their mission. In fact, at BTQ, our motto is that it's your mission to create a better world, and ours is to help. And before we open up for questions, as we round out today, Cecil's going to take us home with some key takeaways from today's conversation, and then we'll open for questions.
Thanks, Andrew. So first, finance challenges in the sector go beyond hiring, right? They're often symptoms of a deeper process or an infrastructure. There's a gap that needs long-term solutions. Second is the right finance partner can bring structure. It can bring stability, it can bring insight, really freeing up leadership to move forward and focus on their mission and not worrying about the back office. And finally, while outsourcing, in common areas such as IT and legal is there, it's still surprisingly underused in finance, even though there's a clear potential for it, capacity. The main thing that we want is for organizations to feel confidence, boost capacity and everything like that for an organization. That's why now more than ever, nonprofits, and as I was saying before, with all the, with the federal funding freezes and the not knowing about how things are going to play out, now more than ever, nonprofits really need a strong financial and accounting partner in their corner. You need people that understand the landscape that can help, build flexibility and planning as well as pivoting in these times of uncertainties.
Thanks, Cecil. And with that, we'd love to hear from you. What questions do you have, or what's resonating most with the challenges you're seeing in your own organization or from others in the space? And if you haven't already, please drop any questions in the chat. We'll be happy to address. And I'm sure Allison mentioned if a question strikes you at any other point, if you're taking a walk or tidying the home, you can feel free to reach out, and we'd be happy to follow up with an email or a conversation as well. Allison?
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, we do have a couple questions that came in. One is, when is a good time to bring in a finance partner?
So a lot of our clients come to us at a critical moment of inflection. I would say usually it's when they're seeing their issues with cash flow, or they're having some kind of internal crisis, or they're at a change in the organization, restructuring, kind of new leadership coming in. But there are other areas where I think more and more organizations are kind of looking to a solution like this, and it's when you're thinking about growth or evolution or changing, and you're looking for expertise and a partnership that can provide that expertise, that it's much tougher to build internally. We're also seeing some organizations who are thinking about finance transformation or putting in a new technology. We often think of as technology as being an ultimate solution, but you can put in the best system, the most Cadillac of systems, and not have the right processes or people in place to drive the performance of it. So as I mentioned, there's a couple of key inflection points of challenge and risk, but we're seeing more and more organizations move toward points of strategy and growth and looking for additional partnership. Anything you'd add on that, Cecil?
No, I think you nailed it.
Thanks.
One person asked what the average revenue size was for the nonprofits that participated in the survey. So I can answer that part of the question. It was 3 million and 200 million in funding was the range that we surveyed. But the second part of the question, they were curious to know if those that are needing to outsource their fiscal department are mostly the smaller non-for-profits in the nation, or do you see a wide range?
So we do have a wide range, and it's kind of interesting that that's the range that we had in the survey. I mean, we have some organizations in our current portfolio that are very small, $1 million or so, and then we have other organizations that are at that $200 million range. And so it really does matter kind of where you are in your journey as an organization and what makes sense for you, but it's across the board. And like I said, we're seeing more and more organizations consider it also because more and more folks are kind of looking at their costs right now and their expenses and what their finance function is actually costing them, as Cecil mentioned earlier. And if you do that, you will start to think, am I paying too much? And is there another option out there that can then inject more dollars into our mission? So it really is a range.
Thank you. Another question that came in, if we aren't ready to outsource our full function, are we able to outsource one piece of it?
That's a great question, Cecil. I don't know if you want to take it or.
Yeah, it's really dependent on what services you need. We always think it's a better transition if it's from A to Z, or your overall, your contracts, your AP, accounting is all part because it goes hand in hand. But we do have, dependent on what services you need, specifically grants management, if that's a specific section you want, but it's really dependent on the client's needs.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add there is, we do offer medical billing as a standalone service, grants and contracts management as a standalone service. Cecil mentioned the most efficiency is gained with the entire cycle. And so we usually don't rip off AP and, kind of GL support. Those kind of go hand in hand. But contracts management and grants management is an area that we do provide standalone support and the medical billing. And those are, if it applies to you, those are the places that you can probably start the journey with, and then think about, if other ones can work for you too.
Great. Well, thank you. That is all the questions we have. Andrew and Cecil, this has been really great, and I appreciate you sharing all your knowledge with us, and thank you everyone for joining today's event.